Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is Stage 8 of Paris-Nice 2025. Today's race, if you went to bed last night and you're the director sportif and you're thinking about trying to win the general classification like Bora Hansgrohe's Lipovitz director sportif, or if you're taking my opinion, our Insman's director sportif from Ineos, if you're trying to win the general classification, well, today's a good day to try to make that happen against Visma Bike's Jorgenson because he doesn't have a climbing team. I've told you guys that from the beginning, and especially after Jonas Vingegaard dropped out with the hand issue, that left Jorgenson isolated as the only pure climber on Visma Bike. So, if you're the director sportif from Bora Hansgrohe and Ineos and you're trying to win the general classification, you need to have the race leader's yellow jersey, Jorgenson, isolated. But not just isolated and sitting on the wheel like we've seen in other stages where they're just getting pulled along by Astana, by UAE Team Emirates, by Bora Hansgrohe, by Ineos riding the front, pulling Jorgenson back there getting a free ride. You need Jorgenson in the win. Okay, the only other way you can win is if Jorgenson flats or he crashes. Possibly he can bonk because it's technical and twisty here when we're talking about finishing these climbs in Nice. Everything's crazy technical. I lived here for a few years. Nothing is fast descents except for when you're coming into Nice proper, just for the last couple kilometers there before you hit the Promenade d'Anglais and you finish out today's stage. Otherwise, all these climbs are 180, switchbacks, everything. So possibly he can crash, possibly he can flat, possibly he can bonk. But if you want to beat him straight up on even terms, you need to get Jorgenson in the win for as much as you possibly can. Now, ideal scenario is you're attacking and you're going up the road with some other threats on general classification and everybody's working together well while you're Lipovitz or Insman and you're working with a 5-person group, so you're taking just some small pulls up there while Jorgenson's back there chasing like crazy. That's the first case scenario. The next case scenario you'd want is Jorgenson pulling like crazy, maybe attacking super early like we see Tadej Pogačar doing, but not with Tadej Pogačar form. And you have Jorgenson up there attacking and he's trying to go solo. And then you have your teammates on the back of whatever group of favorites is back there. They're pulling while you're sitting on all the way into the final climb here that you come into Nice, and then you start the Cat Chemin, and then hopefully you've been sitting on your teammates and Jorgenson's been pulling like crazy trying to hold you off. You catch him just at the bottom of the climb. He's got dead legs. He hasn't had time to eat while you've been back there drinking a Coke and eating a Snickers sitting on your teammate's wheel. Now you light him up on Cat Chemin, the last final climb here at Paris-Nice, and then you get away and you win the general classification. Easier said than done, I know for sure. But if you're trying to win the general classification, that's the only way you could beat a superior climber. All right, so the cameras come on, and when they come on, we see Mads Pedersen bombing down the first descent here. Now we back the film up in the replay version, and you see that Ineos is on the front. They've blown the peloton up, and Mads Pedersen's going over the top of the KOM, sitting about 5th, 6th position. Then he's attacking on the descent. Now we're back live again. As Mads Pedersen's bombing down the descent like a madman, he's been putting on a show. We backed the film up to where there was no film. We know Brandon McNulty's had a hard time. He's already dropped out of the race. We know Visma Bike, their whole team is dropped back there chasing like crazy, someplace at a minute and 30 back. So Jorgenson's isolated. He's on his own at this moment. This is exactly what you want and need. You got to get rid of Visma Bike. You got to have Jorgenson isolated. You know you're not going to drop him on the first climb. So now, unless he's going to crash, bonk, flat, mechanical, something like that, you got to get him on the front. Ineos are driving down this descent. Mads Pedersen's going solo as he hits the flat section here. He's got about a minute gap on the field of GC favorites back there with Ineos. Josh Tarling drilling it. It's Josh Tarling. It's Foss. It's Magnus Sheffield American. And then it's our Insman, who's a threat on the general classification at about 1 minute 20 seconds back from Jorgenson. He's sitting on 3rd on the general classification. Lipovitz is 37 seconds back in 2nd place, and he's got teammates wrapped around him with Bora Hansgrohe. Now, UAE team members are kind of hurting, and Almeida's still in this front group, but we're getting ready to start the second climb. Once we come into the second climb with 47 kilometers to go, it's a hard left turn for the peloton, you see, but Mads Pedersen's already hit this with about a minute gap on the favorites behind. Now we start seeing the attacks right away as Vlasov takes off with Ben O'Connor. Then we see Clément Champuisson from Astana attack, and he goes across. There's 3 guys in the front. This is a fantastic scenario right now for Ineos, And for Bora Hansgrohe, Bora Hansgrohe has a satellite rider up there, Vlasov, who's not a threat on the general classification, but Clement Champuisson is about 3.5 minutes back on the general classification, so that would force Jorgenson at some moment to have to start riding in front of the peloton. But Ineos don't like this move. So they get on the front and they start chasing, and it's Tobias Foss on the front as Josh Tarling's getting dropped. Well, Foss is going to pull back these three guys, and then it's all together again. Why he pulled it back, I don't know why. Clement Champuisson is a threat. This means Jorgenson's job, it would have to be at some point in time to start chasing. Instead, Jorgenson's been able to follow the moves. Now, we start coming to 3 kilometers to go on this climb, and we start seeing the next attacks happening from Lipovitz. As Lipovitz is throwing in his attack, we see Jorgenson's following it straight up right away, and we see that Magnus Sheffield is in this front move. We see that Almeida's getting dropped at the back. Arensman's getting a little bit split off of the back as he's fighting and crawling to get his way back up here. He'll close his way back up, and then Vlasov will throw in another attack. Jorgenson covers this move. The next attack's going to come from Arensman, who clawed his way back, but Jorgenson's going to cover this move too. As all these moves are getting brought back, now we start seeing the next attack from Vlasov and Felix Gall. Gall threw in the attack. Vlasov followed Gall as these guys are trying to bridge up to Mads Pedersen up front. Mads Pedersen's time had been dropping the whole time from all the attacks in the back. And then we see with about 700 meters to go, well, Gall, Felix Gall that is, and Vlasov are bridging up to Mads Pedersen to close up. They go over the top of the KOM here with 3 guys in the front. Now, what's Mads Pedersen been doing? Why has he been up here going ape throughout the beginning of the stage off camera, and now down the descent through the flat spots, and now going up over the KOM in 3rd position? Well, it's the sprint line competition coming up. If I show you the profile on today's stage at 120 kilometers, I'll call it 75 miles in length. They say it's 3 category climbs. I'm going to call it 4, but they say 3 because the sprint line competition's coming up on Col d'Ez, and this thing is about 1.5 kilometers at 9%. So I'm going to go ahead and call it 4 climbs, but they call 3 with a sprint competition on 1 climb. So Mads Pedersen, if he can get to this sprint line points competition and get maximum points, well, he can wrap himself up the green points jersey, but he's got to stay off the front. These 3 riders work over the top of the KOM. They start extending their gap up to about 30 seconds. We're coming down the false descent along the edge there of one of the mountains here in Nice, and this is when things from Ineos' plan starts coming together as Magnus Sheffield throws in attack with 35 kilometers to go and about a 30-second gap to the 3 riders in front. Behind, we see Julian Alaphilippe coming back into the picture. As he comes back into the picture, we see him back at the car, and he's getting a little tight to the side of the car there with a little bit of lean with the left turn coming here. No problem. He grabs some bottles, and he comes back up to storage, starts handing them some bottles. Now, this is why you need teammates. Teammates can remind you to eat and drink. They can hand you bottles. You don't have to stress as much if your teammate's the one going back there rubbing the side of the car, and you can just stay in the draft the whole time. So Julian Alaphilippe's doing a magnificent job right now of looking after Michael Storer in this front group, and I'll call it about 15, 20 riders at this moment. Now the gap up front there to Magnus Sheffield to the 3 riders in front is starting to grow to the peloton behind, and we start seeing some attacks where Jorgenson has to start getting on the front and covering some of the moves from Movistar throwing attacks, and it's going a little bit wide back there. We go up front as we start the Col d'Ez climb. That's really the sprint line competition. They don't call it a climb, but we see the 3 riders together up front, and they're starting to get caught now from Magnus Sheffield. As Magnus Sheffield bridges up to the 3 riders in front, we got 4 guys in front with about a 40-second gap. As those 4 riders are starting to work together, Mads Pedersen can seal himself up the green jersey right now, but he's got to worry because there's some more traffic back there that's going to start attacking fast. As we look back there, we're going to see that it's the American rider Jorgenson's had enough now. He throws in a huge acceleration with 25 kilometers to go. We see Sobrero from Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe sitting second wheel. He gets on the radio right away as Jorgenson's throwing an attack because Sobrero's looking for his teammate Lipovitz to be able to cover this move, but Lipovitz is over on the left side. As Sobrero was looking to the right, Lipovitz is on the left about 10 spots back there, and then Jorgenson starts opening up a gap as Lipovitz is struggling to try to close the gap to Jorgenson, but now the American rider from Visma Lease bike in the race leader's splendid yellow jersey, he's throwing in his next acceleration, and Sobrero blows and opens up to the gap to the American. Now, this is the scenario you would want at this moment. It's not the ideal scenario. The best scenario would be Lipovitz or Insman is up there with Magnus Sheffield or Vlasov in this front group, but you at least have the American rider from Visma Lease Bike in the race leader's yellow jersey in the win right now, going solo with no help. Now, the problem is he could get up there. He could possibly work with Mads Pedersen up there if he bridges up to that gap, but you know Vlasov's not going to work. Magnus Sheffield's not going to work if he gets up there. And you know the American Jorgensen sitting in the wind at this moment. So what happens when we start going up a little bit closer? Well, the climb gets really steep at 14%, and Jorgensen has bridged it down to 14 seconds to the three riders in front. Now, Magnus Sheffield throws in acceleration because Jorgensen's coming fast, but the gap is still at 14 seconds, so Magnus Sheffield with the acceleration is there, and then we see Mads Pedersen throw in a big acceleration with everything he's got because the sprint line competition's coming up. Mads Pedersen goes over Col d'Ez in first position with Magnus Sheffield in second. Now, Vlasov blew from the acceleration from Mads Pedersen, and Felix Gall blew from AG2R, so that opened up the gap. As we look at the top, though, once they start going over the top together, we're going to see Jorgensen go over the top here at the sprint line competition, Col d'Ez. He's got a feeder on the right side. He grabs a bottle, and then he starts accelerating. Now we start looking up front. We see looking back is Magnus Sheffield looking back because he wants some help from Mads Pedersen. As he's looking back, Mads Pedersen will close the gap. Then we see the two chasers in the front that are chasing behind Mads Pedersen. They're looking back as Jorgensen's catching them. Now we got two groups chasing each other, and then we look back as they're coming up Col d'Ez there. Well, Lipovitz lit it up, but then he got brought back as our Insman's leading on the front of the group, and we'll call it 9 guys back in this group with Tejada there, Vergalito's there, Clement Champerson's there, Guillaume Martin's there, Storr's in this front group, Movistar's got a rider in this group, I'll call it Pablo Castrillo, and then Parapinte's there, and Ilan Van Wilder's in this group. Now, we got 9-10 guys back there chasing two up front with Mads Pedersen taking huge pulls. As we start coming down the descent, we hit 20 kilometers to go. 20 kilometers to go is when it starts getting nasty through all the switchbacks here at Paris-Nice, the last and final stage and the last and final second to last, the final descent. It's the penultimate descent with 20 kilometers to go. As we see Mads Pedersen bombing through these corners, Magnus Sheffield's locked on this wheel. These two riders are working well together. We look at the American Jorgensen. He lives here in Nice, so he knows these roads. He's bombing too. And we see Felix Gall's having all kinds of problem along with Vlasov. If I back the film up just a hair, when they were first getting caught by Jorgensen and he flew back through, well, Vlasov looked back over his shoulder too, then sat up and started stretching. Did he drop back for Lipovitz? No, he didn't. That's why he's still on the wheel here of Felix Gall, who's trying to hold the wheel of Jorgensen, but not doing a very good job of it. As those three riders come back together and extend the gap out many times, we start looking back with about 16, 17 kilometers to go. Julian Alaphilippe from Tudor Cycling has found his way onto the back with Sobrero. As he passes by Sobrero, I gotta believe he's just saying, get on my wheel, let's go to the front and try to close this gap up to the American Jorgensen. But we won't see exactly what happens as the cameras go back up to Magnus Sheffield and Mads Pedersen. As those guys are drilling down this descent, Jorgensen's drilling down the descent. He's got his head down, he's going full gas, but he's still got one last and final climb here at Paris-Nice to get through. As we come out the bottom to make the right turn, it's 14-second gap and 14 kilometers to go for Jorgensen and for Magnus Sheffield in the front, and Jorgensen flying out of this corner. Now we're going to start the last and final climb here at Paris-Nice in 2025. It's Cat Chemin. As this climb starts with about 12 kilometers to go, Magnus Sheffield immediately starts getting a gap on Mads Pedersen. With that, Magnus Sheffield's going solo. That means he's got to throw everything into it. Now, at this moment, would I have Magnus Sheffield up here? I wouldn't have Magnus Sheffield up here. Ineos do have it. But if I take you all the way back to when Jorgensen started attacking with 25 kilometers to go, I'd have had Vlasov sit up for sure. I'd have had Magnus Sheffield sit up for sure. And I'd have had him gone back there and drilled it on the front of the group for Lipovitz and our Insman to try to win the general classification. But Ineos are coming in with a plan today, not for general classification, but to win the stage. So Magnus Sheffield's going solo right now, holding a gap of about 15, 13 seconds on Jorgensen behind. As Jorgensen's got two companions on his wheel, Felix Gall's still there and Vlasov is still there. We go further back down and look at the GC guys back there who are fighting for second and third to try to round out a podium here at Paris-Nice instead of racing for the win. Once we see that it's Sobrero on the front coming out of the right turn here, he's looking right down his shoulder the whole time. He's looking right some more. The road is starting to bend back right in front of him. As he hits the curb with his wheels there, he just misses the guy in the red running suit there and then crashes into the wall. Well, that's it for any help for Lipovitz back there, but he's got Vlasov up in the front. Now, when we start looking at Sobrero after he crashed, well, Foss gets back on the front and starts setting some tempo. Remember, they're not trying to win the general classification. They're just trying now to wrap up a stage victory up front with Magnus Sheffield, who's stretching out a little bit of time on Jorgenson. Jorgenson's form doesn't look so spotless now because we see the attack from Felix Gall here with 1.5 kilometers to go. Jorgenson's letting the gap extend out. Then we go back down and start looking at the GC group down there chasing. The cars are now starting to pass. We see it's Foss on the front, and then Lipovitz throws in his attack. Once he gets attack, he's stretching out the gap. Our Ensman's hurting a little bit back there and getting stretched up. Once we go back up front, Magnus Sheffield's going over the top here, the KOM, with a 21-second advantage. As we see Jorgenson back there at about 500 meters to go, he's wrapping up Felix Gall. As he's bringing Felix Gall back, Vlasov got dropped. Now we see Lipovitz is coming up to his teammate Vlasov. We look at our Ensman's closing up the gap there. As he's closing up the gap, he's got some company of Clement Champuson. Michael Storer is in this group, and they're just going to close up to put 5 guys in the front after they go over the final KOM here at Paris-Nice. As these guys are over 1 minute back on the time up there of Magnus Sheffield, there's still 50 seconds plus back on Jorgenson. Now, Jorgenson starts the descent. He starts bombing it like crazy. Once we hit 7 kilometers to go, Felix Gall can't hold the wheel. The American in the race leader's yellow jersey, as he's now going solo chasing Magnus Sheffield. We got Felix Gall back there solo. We got the group of 5 chasers back there as we see Magnus Sheffield bombing this final last 3-4 kilometers as he's going to drop into Nice with about 2.5 kilometers to go. It's a hard left and right turn coming into the Promenade d'Anglais here proper, and Magnus Sheffield's got a gap of about 15 seconds. With this gap, all of a sudden you start seeing Magnus Sheffield do a little bit of celebration at 1.8 kilometers to go, and I'm like, man, you don't have that much time. You better not celebrate. He gets a little bit more focused. I think his director sportif probably told him the same thing because Jorgenson has closed the gap up to about 12 seconds back there. Then we come into 1 kilometer to go. He stretches it back out for a few more seconds. So now Magnus Sheffield looks safe coming in the last 1 kilometer to go. Once he starts coming in the finish here proper, he's going to start celebrating with 25 meters to go. He sits up and starts punching the sky to take his first World Tour victory here for Ineos. Now, second on the stage, we back it up. Just as the time that we see that Magnus Sheffield was starting to celebrate, a smile was coming across the line there of Jorgenson as he knows he's going to wrap up a second victory here at Paris-Nice. He crosses the line, fist punches in the air, does a little wobble to the bike, but gets it back under control. Then it's time to celebrate again. Comes across the line, he gets some hugs. He gets some hugs from Magnus Sheffield, the American, because they came through 1 and 2. And then third on the stage will be Felix Gall, who got dropped with 7 kilometers to go. The rest of the GC favorites will come across the line. Michael Storer rounding out 4th here on stage 8 of Paris-Nice, but he's got 2nd on the general classification. That'll be Lipovitz from Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe, and he's got 3rd on the general classification, which will be our Ensman from Team Ineos. Now, when everything's said and done, we'll start looking at the interview after the podium stuff with Jorgenson talking about he's going to let us decide whether or not if his form's better this year than last year. Well, certainly his confidence has gone up with this victory here at Paris-Nice, but I think his confidence has gone up ever since the Classics began a couple weeks ago when we're talking about Omloop Het Nieuwsblad and Kern Brussels Current. He came in here to Paris-Nice very motivated, very confident. He says now the stress, he can finally release everything because he was incredibly stressed coming all the way up in here at Paris-Nice being the defending champion, wanting to perform well. Now, the only thing that I missed throughout here at Paris-Nice that I really wanted to see, I wanted to see if Jonas Vingegaard was going to battle with Jorgenson throughout these mountain stages here at Paris-Nice after he put himself in the race leader's jersey here early in the first week. Of course, we didn't ever get to see that battle happen once Jonas crashed and hurt his hand. But other than that, Jorgenson, you have been fantastic, and I believe, up here on the Butterfly Effect, better than last year. Certainly your confidence up there, and you were looking like one of the best pro riders over in the European peloton. Now, we start looking at the second interview. I got to bring it up. Magnus Sheffield, it was a fantastic interview. You see him up there crying. I love seeing the emotions when it's happened like this for a young kid that says it's so hard to get your first big victory. This is his first World Tour victory. He has won the Pronzapil in the past, and he's won other races, but this is his biggest victory, and so you love seeing these emotions up here from Magnus Sheffield celebrating his first victory here at the World Tour level at Paris-Nice Stage 8, Col d'Ez. Congratulations. See you guys on the next adventures of the Butterfly Effect real soon.